Harp on Sports, the Bar, podcast, media, audio, and radio network. What do we have in store for you on this edition of the program? Christmas clashes. One, two, I count 8 good games this weekend. 8 pivotal, deciding games. It's funny because this weekend, to me, the third or fourth best game this weekend, the last month would have been the best game. It's crazy to look at what this is. What we have for Christmas clashes in the NFL. So we'll look into that. A lot of fun. Every night's going to be loaded. It's going to be a lot of fun. Christmas weekend when it comes to the National Football League. Mullins might. Dan Mullen throwing a little shade towards the Florida Gators. He's bitter. There's every right to be. Sometimes people taking the high road isn't the best thing. You ever notice that people want humility and pride and class? It never applies to them. It always applies to the other guy. Dan Mullen did something via social media that I think's funny, and he's right. So we'll look at that. And also, something going on with the Gator recruiting class is it was a top 5 class about 6 weeks ago. Now, 6 to 12 weeks ago, 6 to 10 weeks ago, I should say. Now it's not even in the top 15, but don't worry. Gator fans, there's one thing that you can circle, and this person to the Florida Gator football program, there's 2 people that he reminds me of in the National Football League. That's DJ Lagaway. So we're going to look at that. And also, it is National Signing Day, recruiting, and something that is not going to occur this year comes into full focus of what this team means going forward. It's a terrible tease, but don't worry, I'll deliver on it. It's the Georgia Bulldogs. They're not in the college football playoff, but they're the ultimate dynasty in sport now, aren't they? With another number 1 recruiting class. We'll dive into that as well. Again, Harp on Sports, the Bar, podcast, media, audio, radio network. Follow, share, like, subscribe at Harp on Sports Twitter, at Harp on Sports Instagram. You can check us out, the auditory route, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Harp on Sports Facebook page, Harp on Sports YouTube channel, and of course, harponsports.com. Start off with the Christmas clashes. I went through and looked at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 great games in the NFL this weekend. 7 games that feature teams that are 500 or better playing each other. That's hard to get to at this time of year. When you get to a situation heading into the weekend where half the teams that are playing each other are potential playoff teams, all the games are loaded, that means you have some pretty bad ones, but you also have games that feature a playoff team and a non-playoff team, was like the Chiefs and the Raiders, things like that. But I went through and looked at this. Oh my gosh, what a weekend. So I want to look at these and tell you what's at stake here. Think about this one. Also, the Red Hot Bills, Red Hot playing the Chargers, they should wax them, but it's amazing looking at this, to the point that, to me, the low tier game on the totem pole is the 10-4 Lions at the 7-7 Vikings. That's the 7th matchup. The Detroit Lions trying to win they've won their division, trying to lock up a playoff spot. The Lions trying to accomplish something that they haven't done in 30 years, and it kind of just sits there as they sit there at 10-4 and 7-7. Why? Because they can knock the Vikings essentially out of the postseason, but the Vikings are right there. The Rams, the bottom of the NFC is brutal in terms of a playoff structure. The Vikings can't figure it out. Quarterback and Kirk Cousins. It'd have been interesting to see if Kirk Cousins were playing. Would they be a 9-5 Vikings team as opposed to a 7-7 Vikings team? But the Lions, and here's what's finicky about this. You may say, oh, Seth, that's the Vikings. Do you realize the Lions could be the 2 seed in the NFC? The Lions have the exact same record as the Eagles and the Cowboys. Based on how these teams navigate down the stretch, it's possible the Lions could end up being the 2 seed. Now, if the Ravens dump the Niners, the Lions could be the 1 seed. This is the 7th game on the docket this weekend with our Christmas clashes. After that, then there's one that's basically a de facto elimination game and that's the Bengals and the Steelers. The Bengals are red hot. The Steelers are falling apart. One's 8-6, one's 7-7. The Bengals are at Pittsburgh. The Steelers look to be a playoff team, and then they fell apart. And then they're trying to get back to 500, and they back to 500. Here are the Bengals without Joe Burrow making this late season run, and they look pretty dangerous right now. And with the win, if I'd have told you when the Bengals started off as bad as they did, what were they, 0-3 to start? How brutal they looked at the beginning of the year. And Joe Burrow was going to get hurt and be done for the year, and they still have a chance to win double-digit games. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous what's happened here with the Bengals. But the Bengals at the Steelers, here's another de facto. And why this is important, because the Bills need the Steelers to win, and then it puts Buffalo back into the postseason. As Buffalo is lurking. If Buffalo takes care of business, they're going to go 11-6 the rest of the way out, and that's a playoff team when it's all said and done. Heck, they may even win that division. But that's the 6th game on our Christmas clash list. And then we get into 5, 4, and 3 on this list, and they all feature the AFC South. The Jags, the Texans, and the Colts all tied for first place. Which team has the easiest of those games? The Colts. Here are the Colts with Gardner Minshew that sit there at what now? 8-6? Colts sit there at 8-6, and they take on the Falcons, who just laid an egg to the Panthers. Now they have to go to Atlanta, but the Colts sitting there at 8-6 with the easiest of those 3 games. Then you have the Texans hosting the Browns, which would probably be the toughest of those 3 games, especially without CJ Stroud. And then you've got the Jags going to the Bucs. The Bucs have won 3 in a row with Baker Mayfield. With a win this weekend, I think Baker Mayfield pretty much cements NFL Comeback Player of the Year award. And with a win, that division may pretty much be done. Now, look, they still probably have to beat the Saints next weekend. But with a win, think about this. After this weekend, the Colts could be all alone in first place. Actually, if you're a betting person, you'd bet the Browns to beat the Texans, even though the Texans are at home. The Jags at the Bucs, you'd bet the Bucs the way the Jags have played, and the Colts at the Falcons. With 2 weeks to go in the regular season, if you're a betting man, the smart bet after Christmas weekend is the Colts to be all alone in first place with Gardner Minshew, and the Bucs to be all alone in first place with Baker Mayfield. Just like we all thought. The Bucs and the Colts. NFC South, AFC South, both may be all alone in first place Christmas weekend. So those are games 5, 4, and 3 on the list. This game normally would be the best game of the weekend, and it's not. It's the second best game, and that's the Cowboys at the Dolphins. The Cowboys sit there. They're the 5 seed now after getting drilled by the Bills. The Dolphins are the 2 seed in the AFC. They have no wiggle room, though, because with the loss, if the Dolphins lose and Kansas City wins, then Kansas City's the 2 seed, and then the Bills and the Dolphins set up for a de facto elimination game. Basically, the loser of this game, if the Cowboys lose, they're the 5 seed. That's done in the NFC. If the Cowboys win, the Dolphins go from the 2 seed to the 3 seed, and then are going to probably duke it out with the Bills the final week of the year to determine whether or not they're the 3 seed or the 5 seed. 10-4 versus 10-4. Any other Christmas weekend, 10-4 versus 10-4. Vince, Cowboys, Super Bowl preview looked like a couple weeks ago. Because we actually have the top seeds playing each other in the NFL this weekend. The Ravens at the Niners. 1 seed versus 1 seed. And the Ravens are underdogs, and they're upset. They got a chip on the shoulder because they're underdogs. Anybody that plays in San Francisco is going to be an underdog. Think about that. A little separation Sunday, although a lot of these games are on Saturday and Monday because of Christmas. But what a lineup. What a weekend. Christmas clashes in the National Football League. I can't think of a weekend that we had this. This reminds me of conference championship weekend in college football. I can't think of this many good games when the 7th best game on the docket is the Lions and the Vikings, and the Lions can be the 1 seed in the NFC after the weekend. And that's the 7th best game? Wow. What a weekend. What a weekend for Christmas clashes. So we have that. Looking forward to it. On top of that, something happened. National Signing Day. Georgia with the number 1 recruiting class. Going to get to them in a second. But Dan Mullen, former Gator football coach, threw a little shade. And that shade is in the form of an umbrella on a beach. As he, via Instagram, fires off a picture of a margarita on the beach. Like, oh, he's throwing shade at the Gator football program. Of course he is. So, sometimes it's okay to be bitter. This whole thing about always taking the high road, if you always take the high road, then the people that treat you like garbage get away with it always. And I'm not saying Dan Mullen was treated like garbage because he got a nice paycheck, but Dan Mullen did deliver 3 straight New Year's 6 bowl games. That means something, right? Won the Chick-fil-A, won the Orange, got drilled in the Cotton, but a lot of the guys had left by then. And then had a bad year. And got fired because of it. So, he puts the picture of the margarita out. People are wondering whether or not he's trolling or not. Then you start to see recruiting classes and Dan Mullen responding to recruiting rankings. This was fascinating. Dan Mullen's 4 recruiting classes ranks 14, 9, 9, 12. Can't recruit. 14, 9, 9, 12. Billy Napier's 18, 13, 15. Mullen's average 11, Napier's 15. And Mullen responds to this and says, imagine if I had the facilities that they had now. Because Dan Mullen never got to recruit with a completed football facility. Wow. Dan Mullen throwing shade. Okay, so what? Now, don't worry, Gator fans, and dunking on Billy Napier here because there's a little sliver of hope coming up here. But if I tell you the truth and you don't like the truth, I shouldn't tell you the truth? Affirmation as opposed to confirmation? What do you want? Well, he didn't need to be that way. Why not? He's mad. Felt he got a raw deal. He's not coming out saying, I hope you lose. I hope you get beat. He's picked Florida to win football games. He's giving you an honest assessment. And I wish I had the facilities. His recruiting classes were better. His football teams were better. Now, I want to see Billy Napier succeed. He's got a rough road ahead, but I keep hearing Gator fans complain about the schedule. Come on, those first 5 games, you're going to be favored in all of them. Then probably the underdog in the next 7. We're going to be favored in the first 5. So I was looking at this, and guys were bailing. It was a top 5 recruiting class. It ended up being, 17th or 18th? But he landed the big one. Gatorade College Football Player of the Year, DJ Lagaway, coming to Florida. You got the prize possession. You got the prize jewel. The portal can help you fill around the cracks. And look, all these guys come in. These recruiting classes used to be even a monumental deal. But the way the portal works now, they're nice for a little while. But just a couple of years ago, I mean, think about the Gators' biggest 5-star studs that they've had come in. They've all left. Heck, one of them didn't even get into practice. Didn't even get into the spring. Who knows who's going to leave next week? Who knows who's going to leave after the bowl games that you could swoop in and get? So we talked about this last week where the Gators landed the Ivy League Defensive Player of the Year on the defensive line. They landed the big offensive lineman from San Diego State, so they get 2 starters, offensive and defense, in the trenches. Yeah, would you like that, a better recruiting class? Of course you would. But I don't know how much of a deal to make out of these when you have, look at Georgia's great recruiting class last year. 7 or 8 of those guys are gone. Now they top it with the number 1 recruiting class again, but okay. What, Miami had a top 5 recruiting class this year? All right, I guess. When guys stayed until their junior year, when transfers were not that often, fine. But with the invention in the portal, how important is a recruiting class anyway? You get them through their freshman year, freshmen hardly ever play. It matters if you land the big quarterback because at least you got him. And DJ Lagaway, you got him. DJ Lagaway to the Gators to resurrect this program is what Joe Burrow is to the Bengals, what Trevor Lawrence is to the Jaguars. The Bengals were putrid. They'd fallen. I mean, come on. Kitna did an okay job, and Dalton was okay. But Joe Burrow, when he's healthy, makes the Bengals a Super Bowl contender. Trevor Lawrence, the Jags were riding high. They were the 2 seed in the AFC, right? Trevor Lawrence hurts his ankle. Haven't been the same since. Trevor Lawrence is the most important player in the history of the Jaguars. Joe Burrow is the most important player in the history of the Bengals. Those are franchise guys. What Peyton Manning was to the Colts, that's what TJ Lagaway is to the Gators. Resurrect this puppy. Rebuild this sucker. That's how important he is. I don't even know. I'm trying to find guys out here in college football who are even close to this. That's what he means. Look at what Tim Tebow meant to the Gators. TJ Lagaway, it's not even close what he means to them. The resurrecting of the franchise. Look what Johnny Manziel meant to A&M. That's what DJ Lagaway means to the Gators. The most important football player to step foot on this campus since Tim Tebow. Means everything. So look, there's a silver lining here of what DJ Lagaway coming in, and I don't know what the weaponry is. He's got a good running back. He's going to have 2 solid guys up front. And does he start? I don't know if he starts right away. But from the Mullen troll job to this, it was a rough day for recruiting for the Florida Gators. It was. But I don't know how important that is anymore. I say that I pivot to this just because I don't know if one class is important, but if you're always number 1, then it is important. Now, you can supplement with the portal. That's why I'm not going to sit here and say it's life or death. If the Gators would follow the 18th recruiting class with another 18 next year, you got to get in the top 10. You just have to get in the top 10 if you want a shot at this thing. You can look at like Washington. You can get into the college football playoff, TCU, without having a top 10 class, but then you need to land the marquee quarterback. See, it's where I'm going with the Gators. Look at like what Bo Nix did at Oregon, although they have a top 10 recruiting class. Look at Washington did with Michael Penix Jr. You can get there with an elite quarterback without a top 10 class, but it's a one-shot deal. You can't sustain it. And I was sitting here thinking about this as we get ready to head into 2024, and I'll do that podcast next week as we look ahead to next year, stories of the year, and look forward to next year. But a little precursor to that, Georgia has the number 1 recruiting class again. It's the 4th time in 5 years they've had the number 1 recruiting class. Back-to-back national championships. On the outside looking in this year, because of what happened, how they lost to Alabama late in the year. Even though they won't win the national title this year, they're the preeminent program in college football. Just because you don't win the championship doesn't mean you're not the best program in the sport. And they're the preeminent program in college football. They're the dynasty in college football. So I wanted to go through, and the number 1 recruiting class, it may not be the end-all be-all for them, but it pretty much locks them in a position. Do you see any way that they're not in the top 12 next year? Where the college football playoff hits, I guess one of the 7 ranked, highest ranked, right? Because it's the top 4 conferences, 5-12. So do you see any way that Georgia's not one of the top 7, if they don't win the SEC, they're not one of the top 7 ranked teams in college football outside of the conference champs? Come on. The only shot you had to keep Georgia out of the college football playoff is with the current system. Once it goes to 12, they're always there for the foreseeable future. They're going to be in it. So Georgia is that dynasty in college football. And another one, they're the dynasty. If they'd beaten Alabama, you'd be chalking it up as maybe the greatest run of any junior, senior class ever in college football. But I went through and looked at this. Sports that currently have dynasties or dynasties in the making. Georgia dynasty in the making. Warriors dynasty. They are. They're a dynasty. What, 4 rings for the guys? And they would have won 4 in a row if LeBron didn't win the one in there. But with Clay and Steph and who knows with Draymond, now they're wavering, right? The Nuggets could be a dynasty maybe in waiting, but if the Bucks would win one, then that'd be 2, but they'd be in waiting. I think you have to win at least 3 before you bust out the D word. So you have a bunch of dynasties in waiting. The Warriors are one. They are one. They're a dynasty. And looking to add the 5th. And then if they'd win another one with Steph, then you can start comparing the Warriors dynasty to the Lakers dynasty with Kobe and Shaq. Or I guess it was Kobe because Shaq was gone for the last 2. But Kobe's dynasty, Tim Duncan, is his dynasty in... Right, it's what you do. With another one, the Warriors, you start comparing them to the Lakers dynasty and the Spurs dynasties. Georgia, you're not quite comparing them to what Nick Saban did with Alabama, but you're close. This recruiting class is just going to push that. The Chiefs have got 2. If they'd win one this year, then yes. And then you start comparing the Chiefs dynasty to what? The Cowboys dynasty with Aikman. Start comparing them to the Patriots are kind of like 2 different dynasties, but you start to compare them to Tom Brady a little bit. Not exactly, but a little bit. You start comparing Mahomes to Montana and Bradshaw, and you could start doing that. You bet you could. Elway, you could start doing that with Mahomes and the Chiefs. You bet you could. The Broncos may be the best example, although John did win his late, but what the Chiefs are doing to the AFC is a lot like what Denver did to the AFC in the 80s, late 80s, and all the way into the 90s. Major League Baseball doesn't really have one. The Astros are the closest to it. The Astros with a couple World Series, they get back and they win another one, then you're there. But then that's 3. Hockey doesn't have one. Now, college basketball is interesting on the men's side because Villanova in North Carolina won a couple championships and lost a championship game. So they were kind of there. The team that's the closest to that is what? Kansas? Kansas and UConn. If UConn can win another one that's back to back, if Kansas can win one, it's like, okay, then Kansas has won 2 of the last 3. You can start to have those discussions. But that would just be the second one. These other ones are looking for a 3rd. Georgia's looking for a 3rd. Chiefs are looking through a 3rd. The Warriors looking for a 5th. Astros are looking for a 3rd. College basketball, we're not quite there yet. But as you look into 2024, the Chiefs have a chance to be a dynasty now. They win the Super Bowl this year, they're a dynasty. Next year, Georgia has a chance to be. The Astros have a chance to be. Are we in the decade of dynasties? Only sport that doesn't have one's baseball. The only sport I can't find that doesn't. I shouldn't say. The only sport that doesn't have one's hockey. The Astros are the closest thing that you can get to one. There's too many different teams have been winning World Series. Remember baseball for the longest time? Everybody talks about buying championships, the Yankees, and how it needs a salary cap. No sport has more parity in terms of different teams winning championships in baseball. It's kind of crazy. So there you go. Harp on Sports, the podcast, media, audio, radio network. Follow, share, like, subscribe at Harp on Sports Twitter, at Harp on Sports Instagram. Harp on Sports auditory route, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcast. Harp on Sports Facebook page, Harp on Sports the Bar, the YouTube channel, and of course, harponsports.com. Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas. Remember, stay clean, stay focused, stay strong. Frankenstein. Have fun with your friends.